Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for coming out and joining us this evening for our seventh public workshop on our Vision 2040, which is our master planning process. I would say kind of like at church, so a lot of people are in the back, but we still have plenty of room up front if anybody wants to come up and grab a seat if you're standing. My name is Dickie Thompson. I'm the chairman of the board of the Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority. And it's good to see everybody. I see a lot of familiar faces from previous meetings. Thank you for coming back, and it's also good to see a lot of first-timers with us this evening. Tonight, we have members of our our consulting team at Recondo Associates. They will share some conceptual plans and layouts of potential land use for the airport. They will also discuss the FAA regulations pertaining to land use owned by the airport authority. After their presentation, we will follow the same format that we've used at our other 6 workshops. So, except this time, we're going to all go out into the lobby where we have got an exhibit space out there where we can display the boards, and you can talk with the staff and our consultants one-on-one and ask questions there. And also, if you have any comments you'd like to make. We also will have several tables set up there with forms that you can manually write in your comments or questions, or you can also go to our website at Vision 2040. You know, by our increased attendance tonight, I understand the importance of how the land use of the airport is to the community. In fact, we added this meeting tonight on our public workshop schedule because we knew there would be so much interest. So we would like to answer your questions and address any concerns that you may have. Since we began this process over a year ago, we have been committed to collecting feedback and ideas from the public on our plan all along. That commitment has not changed, and we still work very hard to put together a plan that will guide the future of RDU's future growth and success for the next 25 years. So thanks again for your attendance and your participation tonight, and please remember that the questions will be answered outside in the lobby when we finish our presentation tonight. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Colleen Quinn with Recondo Associates. Thank you.
Okay, to amplify what Mr. Thompson said, thank you very much for coming out tonight because this is an important part of our planning process. We really want to continue to share the ideas as they go through the refinement and evaluation process, and as part of that, we continue to enhance those. So tonight you will see these land use ideas that are new information that we certainly want to get your feedback on. So this is quite valuable to us as well. So after the short presentation, we really do want to engage you in the back of the room and out in the lobby there because we want to get your input, we want to answer your questions. We've got a number of folks from the planning team here as well as authority staff. So please take advantage of that when we get through this process. So with that, I'll kind of jump into our presentation here, and we've got a reasonably short agenda, very focused on what we want to cover, and that is to give you the aeronautical context for understanding the land use planning. This is an important part of the process because the FAA has very clear expectations that we have to adhere to on the planning side, and certainly that the authority has to adhere to on the long-term development side. So we'll give you some of that background, and then we have some folks from our land use planning experts, and they're going to talk you through the land use planning elements of the process and some very particular challenges, constraints, and regulations that they have to work within as well. Okay, so we'll start out with the planning context, land use planning context in terms of aeronautical facilities. I think many of you who may have attended some of the prior public sessions and or have been to the project website have seen these goals. And they are the 6 goals that we defined early in the master planning process, and they're the ones that we use to conceptualize our aeronautical facility development, refine those, evaluate them, ultimately refine the preferred alternative once we get down to a single one But they also guide the land use planning effort. So these 6 goals are central to the master plan process. So we want to just continue to put these in front of you because they serve as our guideposts as we go through the study. Okay, in terms of aeronautical facilities, I think we have shared, I know that we have shared previously the analysis that led us to understanding and concluding what the long-term aeronautical needs are of the airport based on the forecast of passenger activity and aircraft activity. And we put together the concepts, some concepts to accommodate that development, those aeronautical facilities. And we now have to conform land use planning to that. And so what's an important understanding is that the land use planning has to conform to the aeronautical facilities and to the FAA's expectations. First and foremost, we need to meet the aeronautical demand at the airport with this long-term vision and plan for the future. And we've got to do that by conforming with FAA planning and design standards. They dictate what those are, and we apply them in our process as creatively and productively as we can, given the challenges at every airport. There's also a natural hierarchy in the facilities that drive us through the planning process, and we start with the most demanding operationally and safety-wise, and that's the airfield. And we continue to move in from that toward the terminal and then the land side, providing efficient, safe access to the airport, and then on into the support facilities. And the land use planning process, these facilities in hierarchy essentially come before the land use planning. These facilities need to be accommodated and conceptually placed on the airport so that the land use planning experts can then look at the opportunities to maximize the land use opportunity. Okay, I'm going to walk through it very quickly. I think some of this is old news, but I'll touch on it very quickly. The aeronautical development, and we've got the 4 types of facilities. We start with airfield, that again being the highest in the hierarchy. And we've taken that long-term vision, and we do understand what we need to do by 2040. And essentially, the airfield can look the same at the end of that planning horizon in 2040. There is not a capacity-driven need for a 3rd runway. However, outside that 25-year horizon, so beyond that, we do want to plan for the ultimate and the long-term capacity or capability to grow the airport. So we do plan for the facilities to go beyond 2040 in the airfield case. Again, that's the highest in the hierarchy of facilities. And we've also got to accommodate a changing aircraft fleet, and that ripples through not just the airfield, but on into the terminal. Aircraft are very different now than operated 20 years ago, 40 years ago, but yet the facilities are the same. So we have to use this opportunity to bring those facilities up into conformance with current FAA criteria based on the current and the future anticipated aircraft fleet. And there's also an opportunity here with the reconstruction of the necessary reconstruction of runway 5 left, 23 right. And that is a condition-driven requirement that runway is aging and is becoming deficient in terms of its ability to accommodate aircraft activity. So that will, as the reconstruction need is identified, we factor that into our planning and our development of concepts as well. Some of the highlights on the terminal aeronautical needs, we're looking at over the long term a need for up to about 23 additional gates, so roughly a 50% increase in what you have today, the number of gates. And as we expand the number of gates, of course, we have to expand the building to accommodate those gates and the passengers that move through the building, the airlines that operate in that terminal, and the regulatory requirements for processing passengers, security checkpoints, and elements like that. So we do see the need for increasing terminal space, increasing gates. We do see some areas in the terminal for very specific processes to be enhanced, including baggage, security screening checkpoints, and hold rooms, again, to marry up to the aircraft fleet. On the land side, we take a hard look at the airport roads and the access into the airport, and we look at the terminal area roads and tight to the core. We look at the non-terminal area roads. We also look at commercial vehicles and the ability to accommodate those to serve passengers that are flying into your airport. We look at parking, which typically serves your local passengers. We look at rental cars, which tends to serve your arriving and visiting passengers. And we roll this all up into the landside concepts that you've seen so far, and you'll see the short list of 4 of those again this evening. In our last category are support facilities, and the two main components of this are cargo and general aviation. Those are the two drivers on the support facility side, but we also do pick up those miscellaneous facilities necessary for the airport to operate. So it is the things like flight kitchens, ground service equipment handling, and the various activities that go on that most people don't see at an airport. And those all fall into this category. So we are seeing the need to grow those facilities and locate those on the plans as well over the planning horizon. So very quickly to talk about the process and where we are now, we did develop a large number of alternatives in each of these categories. We put those together after a screening process into a set of 9 fundamental concepts that we evaluated and took down to a short list of 4. And those 4 you'll see tonight. They will be out in the lobby area here. And we want to answer your questions about those. We want to talk to you about how we got to those 4. But those are the 4 that we will continue to refine, continue to evaluate, with the idea that one of those or a hybrid of those will emerge as the preferred alternative for long-term development. Those 4 shortlisted alternatives are also the 4 that are the basis for the land use planning. So those underpin the land use planning concepts that you will see tonight as well. So together they form the necessary fabric. It's very difficult to look at land use outside of the context of those aeronautical facilities. So you'll see both. Again, we'll take the final 4 through the refinement process with the idea of getting to a single preferred alternative that will again be shared with the public. And so with that, I'm going to introduce our land use planning team experts here, and they're going to talk to you about very specifically land use. They'll be available also after the presentation this evening, and you'll be able to engage them in all the questions you might have. So with that, I'll introduce Mark Champagny from CNS. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. I appreciate the opportunity. We think this is a unique opportunity to educate the community on what's been accepted by the authority, the governing bodies, and ultimately the general public with regard to operating an airport here at Raleigh-Durham. The following provides a baseline of information for what can be done within the parameters the airport operates in, and what they've accepted as part of the Surplus Property Act, as well as subsequent federal obligations and grant assurances for receiving federal funding. The authority's jurisdiction is limited to the airport property line, so really they need to work with the local municipalities, the governing bodies that are part of the airport to encourage incompatible land use, such as residential schools and churches that surround airports. You don't want that activity in those land uses. Encourage compatible land use at the airport, industrial and commercial to locate around the airports. Preclude noise-sensitive land uses away from areas exposed to aircraft noise, and then be responsive to local markets and plans. So really that's part of this component of the master plan and what we're looking to do here. What does land use compatibility look like for an airport? It supports airport operations. It produces new revenue sources. It creates residual airport assets. It improves airport land values. It enhances the airport property tax base, promotes economic development, and manages expectations. A component of land use compatibility is protecting the airspace in and around the airport. Having the safe operation of aircraft to and from the runway system is really the key and most important factor that an airport takes into compliance. Federal aviation regulations set those standards. Part 77, we call them imaginary surfaces, that are upward sloping surfaces from the runway system that provide a protection mechanism for those aircraft approaching and departing the airport. So that's just a component that needs to take into account and usually stems off the runway approaches and runway ends at the airport. The FAA controls the movement of aircraft. The airport sponsor provides the information to the community, and ultimately the communities can implement and regulate those land use controls. The next set of slides set the stage for the federal obligations that have occurred, really the history of the airport, the property conveyance when the airport came into being, and then the FAA grant agreements that continue on an annual basis as the airport continues to accept federal funding here. So, pardon with me, some of it's going to be a little dry, but we do think it's an important context for the conversations that we'll have as to why we're considering some of the land uses that we are considering at the airport. Stepping into the history, Captain Eddie, in 1938, Eddie Rickenbacker, president of Eastern Airlines, became a strong advocate for a new modern airport. In 39, the Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority was created. In 1940, the state acquired 891 acres on RDU's current site. But soon after ground was broken, World War II began. A similar story at many airports across the country. The airport was deemed necessary by the Department of Defense and the Secretary of War in 1941, and ultimately named the airport the Raleigh-Durham Army Airfield. Just as I'm going to go through these fairly quick, but RDU.com has a full, more detailed history if anybody has some interest and wants to know more about each of these components. The U.S. At 1943, the U.S. War Department designated the airport Raleigh-Durham Army Airfield. 1943, the Raleigh-Durham Aeronautical Authority persuaded the federal government to allow commercial airline service. And with that, Eastern Airlines began service using an Army barracks as a small terminal. And then on January 1st, 1948, the federal government officially conveyed the airbase to Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority under the terms of the Surplus Property Act. At the time of the conveyance, the airport encompassed just over 1,200 acres of property valued at $2.23 million and was received for an initial investment of just $65,000 by the local governments. Along with the airbase conveyance under the Surplus Property Act came a requirement to abide by a variety of federal obligations. So what seemed like a really good deal for $65,000 back then came with a lot of strings and strings attached, and those have survived the 68 years since. Since that time, in 1948, we accepted various grants from the FAA, primarily for capital improvements at the airport. These, just in the last 25 years, these have amounted to over $115 million. And then as the airport continues to operate, there's an annual capital program. The master plan will set the stage for what some of those projects are in that capital program. There'll be the continued need to receive that money from the FAA. So when the authority accepts federal grants, they also agree to abide by these federal obligations. Failure to abide by these obligations can result in a loss of the funding. In extreme cases, a requirement to reimburse and pay those funds back. Some of these federal obligations are also contained in the form of grant assurances. Just to mention also too, we'll refer to the airport compliance manual that's in the lower right of the slide. That's referenced in your handout as well, so if you want to Google it and look it up, it's pretty thick, some good bedtime reading, but that's really where a lot of these come from if you're interested in doing that. Out of the 39 airport grant assurances that the airports are required to live by, we've highlighted just 4 of them here for you that pertain to land use planning. Assurance number 20 is hazard removal. Goes into the Part 77 surfaces, the imaginary surfaces that I mentioned before. The airport's duty to work with the community to protect that airspace surrounding the airport for the safe operation of the aircraft. Assurance number 21 is the compatible land use, assuring that the development in and around the airport, on the airport, is compatible. Assurance number 24, the fee and rental structure. Maintain a fee and rental structure that makes the airport self-sustaining. And what this really allows the airport to continue to invest. You saw in the opening presentation economic impact of more than $8 billion on an annual basis, somewhere over 20,000 jobs as well. So it's an important economic engine for the airport to continue to invest in. And it's also important to note that these apply to all airports nationally that accept federal grants. This isn't unique to the Raleigh-Durham Airport as well. Assurance number 25, airport revenues. All revenues that are generated by the airport and the airport authority must be expended by it for capital or operating costs of the airport. There are older deeds and agreements as things have changed through the years. Some of these agreements contain special conditions. Really, just for full context, these are cases, in all of these cases, they're generally more restrictive than what the general grant assurances are. But there are some cases, not really applicable here, but in some cases there can be special conditions, but usually, like I said, in a more restrictive manner. So the federal obligations that were mentioned really ensure the public interest of civil aviation will be served. That's their main purpose and why they're set up. The federal law requires airport accept federal obligations as a condition of the receipt of the federal grant. So once you sign and accept that federal funding, we need to live up to those. And it's not just the authority; it's the owning bodies. It's the Wake County, City of Raleigh, City of Durham, and Durham County have also accepted these federal obligations by being part of the owning body. The authority has accepted these federal obligations through the years, through the grants, accepting grants. So what are the obligations? One, airport property must be used to support the development, maintenance, and operation of the airport. If not needed to directly support an aviation use, such property must be available for use to produce income for the airport at fair market value. Such property may not be leased, rented, or rented at a discount or for nominal consideration to subsidize non-airport objectives, what is typically referred to as revenue diversion. Under this, examples of revenue diversion, using airport revenue for general economic development activities, paying in excess of the value of goods or services for the airport receives, charging less than fair market value rental rates to non-aeronautical users, using airport revenue to participate in some types of community events, paying for marketing and promotions not related to the airport. Through compliance inspections and audits that the FAA conducts, they have discovered issues of revenue diversion at airports across the country, and in many cases have fined them and made them pay back the diverted revenue. Continuing on the federal obligations, airport property cannot be used, leased, sold, salvaged, or disposed of for other than airport purposes without FAA approval. Property must be used for airport purposes, uses directly related to the actual operation of the foreseeable aeronautical development of the airport. And incidental use of the property must be approved by the FAA. Really, the FAA and any land use decisions, the FAA has an approval process and step. Whether it's aeronautical, non-aeronautical, they're always approving what the airport can and can't do on the airport layout plan. If any such property is no longer needed to support an airport purpose or activity directly, including the generation of revenue for the airport, the property may be released from the federal obligations for sale or disposal upon a demonstration that such disposal will produce an equal or greater benefit to the airport or another public airport than the continued retention of the land. I'm almost done. A release from the federal obligations is not granted unless the FAA determines that the land involved can be disposed of without adversely affecting the development, improvement, operation, or maintenance of the airport where the land is located. And any approved disposal must not be in excess of the present and foreseeable needs of the airport. This objective is not met unless an amount equal to the amount of the fair market value of the property is realized. Am I one behind?
Yeah.
Sorry. This objective is not met unless an amount equal to the current fair market value of the property is realized as a consequence of the release, and such amount is committed to airport purposes. The non-aviation interest of the sponsor or the local community does not cut up. Switch it out.
Head back.
Got tired of listening to the dry stuff. All right, the last bullet here. The non-aviation interest of the sponsor or the local community does not constitute an airport benefit that can be considered in justifying a release and disposal. In addition, some airports, when they have released land, have had to pay back a prorated portion of their grant proceeds within a certain time frame. So with that, that's the conclusion of my slides. I'm going to transition to Barbie, who probably has a little bit of a more interesting component of the presentation here to discuss the non-aeronautical concepts we're considering.
Yes, is everyone still with me? I think you're all still awake. Thank you, Mark. So now that we're all on the same page, I hope, and we have a baseline understanding of the many constraints and obligations placed on the airport for the use of its land, let's talk more about an opportunity that actually fits within those constraints, those parameters, which is non-aeronautical development. First of all, what is non-aeronautical development? So if aeronautical development has to do with the activities driven by passenger aircraft movement, airline activity, then non-aeronautical development is that which is not tied to the core aviation functions of the airport on land that is not needed at this time or at that time for aviation purposes. So these types of uses would be commercial, like office, retail, maybe industrial, flex, or hotel. And as a note, residential is not a permitted use on airport property. So then the question is, why should we develop those properties that are not needed for aeronautical purposes? And there are several different reasons, several different benefits to it. The first is a provision, it provides opportunity for community-wide economic benefit. The airport has an opportunity to utilize its property to work within the local market context, providing land for development of offices, shopping centers, hotels,
Trails.
Industrial, which equals jobs. And tax revenue also comes from the improvement of those lands. The property that's not directly used for aeronautical need or purposes can also be used to generate revenue for the benefit of the airport. So those types of properties that are not needed for aeronautical use are being identified through the master plan that is at hand. And in fact, the revenue generation from these properties is one of the tools that the airport has to sustain itself. And in fact, the next bullet is financially sustaining sustainability of the airport. This actually impacts all of us that fly. The cost per enplaned passenger is a metric that the airport works with. That's a cost that they pass on to the airlines, who ultimately pass it on to us in our airline tickets. So when airports can utilize their property and other sources for revenue generation, it ultimately can help with the cost per enplaned passenger that you and I see ultimately in our ticket prices. Also, the financial sustainability helps the airport reinvest in its properties, the non-aeronautical development, to serve its mission to deliver excellent airport services, facilities, and unparalleled customer service. And that can be, those non-aeronautical developments can also create an excellent passenger experience through cell phone lot amenities, a place to get a cup of coffee, a place to refill your gas tank, just like the sheets that exist on airport property right now. And it's also important to note that financial sustainability is really a critical function of the airport, since airport development is not, and hear me on this, it's not funded through tax revenue. It's funded through airport user fees, basically. So it's not funded through tax dollars, so it is very important that the airport has a number of tools to utilize to create a self-sustaining enterprise. So to understand the market opportunities for non-aeronautical development at RDU, we must first understand a few of the market realities at RDU. Airport land presents opportunities for commercial and aviation development to support airport operations. And some of the advantages include its central location. As you all know, it has excellent access to major transportation corridors like I-40, 540, and as well as Glenwood Boulevard. that's within very close reach of RTP and different large emerging growth areas. The 3 top-tier research universities in this area also position the region well. Airport property is available to support local market opportunities in the community while achieving airport goals and sustainability. The airport is also a willing community partner for on-airport development, of development that meets those parameters and federal obligations that Mark just shared with all of you. And then, of course, one of the advantages is the positive passenger experience here at RDU and the annual growth that is projected as well. So keeping all of those in mind, we also have to acknowledge that airports must deal with a number of unique challenges when it comes to working with the private market to bring non-aeronautical development on site that the private fee-simple properties simply do not face. Some of those challenges include the surrounding market. There is an inventory of fee-simple land within the airport vicinity, and that often proves to be the path of least resistance for developers within the community. And then, of course, you all just sat through an extensive presentation about all of the FAA requirements, and I'll highlight just a couple here again. The airport must receive fair market value. It cannot be used as a land bank where land can be given away. It has to receive fair market value for the utilization of its properties. And honestly, those properties are available basically on a ground lease. It's very difficult to release that property, and the FAA is very concerned with the retention of property for those civil aviation functions should they ever be needed. So airport land is available on a ground lease with often a more limited term than perhaps the local community and development community would wish. The regulatory process through approvals through the FAA can slow the development process, which we all know in the development community, time is money. So it's not that development can't happen on an airport. It's just that an airport faces a number of constraints, and this is not unique to RDU. This actually does occur at airports across the country in varying sized communities. That these constraints are real because they do come with the federal obligations for accepting grant funds. And then finally, ground leases make financing a bit more challenging for developers. The financing entity like a bank may say, I'm sorry, you don't own this property, you're ground leasing it, and that can it's not impossible, but it can add an extra level of complexity. All right, so with that, establishing the market realities here at RDU. We're going to move on to talking about some identified market opportunities. So as a result of the recommendations of the ULI study that was conducted several years ago, one of the recommendations actually was to further study the issue, better understand the timing and the potential quantity of development that could occur on airport park properties. I know this slide is pretty blurry, and so we actually have a blown-up version of it that will be available in the lobby after this presentation that we'd be happy to talk with you about for further detail, but I will go over some of the details here. So my team performed a commercial market analysis to understand how the local area would impact and influence the airport over the planning horizon, which is 25 years, to understand what the development potential might be, the demand for commercial development, and how the airport might capture some of that commercial development. We looked at office, industrial and flex, retail, and then hotel. I do want to make a note, so we're all on the same page, that flex property, many of you may be familiar with that product, but flex property has to be 50% office use. And the remainder of it is indeed flexible. It can be used for laboratory space, research and development, light assembly, or manufacturing. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page with terminology. So we established a market and trade area around the airport, and we took a look at market conditions within that area and what the projections of future demand would be. Then we applied a fair share allocation of that demand to the airport based on a number of factors, which included competitive sites in the market and trade area, the ground lease constraint, the critical mass of established developments with existing infrastructure, the anticipated growth of the study area, replacement demand for functionally obsolete facilities and buildings in the future, and then the expanding and emerging market clusters of this area and the region. What we found was that there is very limited demand for capture on the airport within really the first 10 years. You can see we're not showing capture demand within this next 5 years or this current period, and there is some limited demand in what we call the midterm of some small-scale industrial and flex, and then mainly what we anticipate would be more convenience-style retail, not unlike the sheets, and something that would be in complement to that on airport property. And then probably about one hotel property that would be a select service hotel, which is like a Courtyard Marriott. So we also looked at a variety of development types and development patterns within Raleigh-Durham area. In this market area, we saw that a lot of office campuses are actually part of a planned business park. Indeed, some of the industrial and flex is as well. There are standalone facilities, but many of them do exist in that type of format. There could be potential for retail in the future, in the long term, that is a larger scale, that would have more of a larger regional draw, and then again another hotel opportunity in the long term. And again, that will be available in the lobby, and I'd be happy to speak with you about any questions you have after this presentation. So now we're going to talk about some of the land use considerations when these land uses look to locate, why they would be located in certain places. And these generally apply to the respective uses that we've indicated within the local marketplace. Office likes to be close to major transportation corridors, accessible to population centers, since that's where employees live. And as I mentioned before, in sort of a planned business park style development. Industrial and flex, again, major roadway access is very important for truck activity and for accessibility. There may be possible airport connectivity needs that should be taken into account. And standalone in business park or commerce park setting is often observed. For retail, visibility and access is key, especially for those commercial retailers. Transportation corridors and intersection proximity are important, as are the proximity of growth centers, which is households and population and employment centers. And then finally, hotel, we often see those along major transportation corridors, and interchange locations are especially attractive near employment centers, attractions, airports like this one. And out-parcel co-location can often occur with office or retail development. So this concept map is just that. It's a concept map, and it shows the potential land use, the potential non-aeronautical land uses that we're considering. So we're not going to cover this here because we need to see this in much more detail. There are 2 large-scale duplicates of this map in the lobby, or will be, once this presentation is concluded. So I want everybody to hear that. There are 2 maps, but they are duplicates of one another. They don't represent anything separate. And I do look forward to interacting with you all one-on-one, answering your questions, and receiving your feedback and comments once we've concluded.
Okay, very quickly, so you all can move into the lobby area and start to take a look at these concepts. We just wanted to let you know what the next steps are going to be. As you know, you heard me say we're down to 4 alternatives. Our next steps are ultimately get this down to 1 alternative. That will be shared at the next public workshop, which is scheduled for the fall. So that is the time when you'll see the final idea and the one that will be enhanced and refined for the FAA's approval. That concept will then move into implementation planning, where we look at financial feasibility, the ability to implement and construct over time, and correlating the demand to the specific elements of aeronautical development. So that will all follow once we've got that final idea identified. So with that, again, we appreciate your participation tonight, and we really do want to engage you in questions, answers, comments in the back. We'd love if you give us written comments as well as verbal. We're here to listen and take in as much as we can, but it's very helpful to us to have the written comments, and that's accommodated out in the exhibit area there with clipboards and specific forms. You can always provide input through the project web page on the authority's website, so we'd encourage you to do that if you can't take the time this evening to fill out the comment forms. So with that, again, we appreciate your participation, and we'll talk to you in the lobby area. Thank you.